Welcome everybody to our class of biology 11th standard, and we are now in chapter 2, that is biological classification, and today we will see part 4. So before we move on to part 4, let us revise part 3. So what did we learn in part 3 of biological classification? We learned about kingdom Protista, and we know now that kingdom Protista are all single cell eukaryotes. So since they are eukaryotes, they will have a well-defined nuclear membrane around the nuclear material, and they will also have various membrane-bound organelles inside the cytoplasm. And we had seen that kingdom Protista share features with kingdom Plantae, kingdom Animalia, kingdom Fungi. So we classify these various organisms in kingdom Protista as plant-like protists, which consists of chrysophytes, dinoflagellates, and euglenoids. Fungus-like protists, which are slime molds, water molds, etc. Animal-like protists, that is protozoans. We find that the plant-like protists are photosynthetics, whereas animal-like protists are heterotrophs. They are primarily aquatic, and they may reproduce by both asexual as well as sexual means. And if we see each of these protists, we find that chrysophytes, examples are diatoms and golden algae. They are planktons. They move passively in the water along with the water current. They are photosynthetic, that is autotrophs, and they are the major producers in the ocean. Just summarizing dinoflagellates, we know that dinoflagellates have got a cellulose wall, cell wall, and a tough cellulose cell wall, and they may be of different colors depending upon the nature of the pigment which is present inside them. And they are also photosynthetic. Some of the dinoflagellates, like red dinoflagellate, goniolox, also gives rise to red tides in ocean. Summarizing euglenoids, the example is euglena, which are mostly present in the stagnant water. They do not have a cell wall, but they have a pellicle, which makes them more flexible. And they also have flagella, which help them to move. They are also photosynthetic, and in unfavorable conditions, when they are not exposed to sunlight, they may also behave like heterotrophs. Next, coming to fungus-like protists, slime mold. So slime molds are saprophytic, feeding on organic material present in decaying plant twigs and leaves. In unfavorable conditions, they also produce fruiting bodies and which bear the fruits, which bear the spores. Lastly, protozoans, which are animal-like protists, and they are heterotrophs. They may be predators or parasites. And the different types of protozoans we had seen were amoeboid protozoan, like entamoeba, flagellated protozoan, like trypanosoma, ciliated protozoan, like paramecium, and sporozoan, like plasmodium, which produces malaria. So this was in brief about the kingdom Protista, which we had seen in the part 3. So let us move on to part 4, which consists of kingdom fungi. So we are going to study kingdom fungi under these headings, that is Phycomycetes, Ascomycetes, basidiomycetes, and deuteromycetes. Now, the first three are called as perfect fungi because they show both sexual as well as asexual mode of reproduction, whereas deuteromycetes are called imperfect fungi since they show only asexual mode of reproduction. So let us see general introduction to the fungi first. So fungi, they are heterotrophic organisms. That means they show a great diversity in morphology as well as habitat. So they vary in morphology, that is structure, as well as their habitat, that is the environment in which they live. And they are cosmopolitan. That means they are present all over the world. They can be found anywhere. So they can occur in air, they can occur in water, soil, or they can be present on or inside the plants and animals also. So some of the common fungi which we see around us are, if we keep the bread outside in the moist, damp climate, moist, damp circumstances, we find that the bread gets covered with a fungus, which is whitish grayish in color. Similarly, on the surface of rotten fruits, we find fungi. Then mushrooms, some of the edible mushrooms that we eat are fungi. Some mushroom-like organisms called as toadstool, though they are not edible, they are also fungi. Also, we find fungus growing on various leaves of different plants, like mustard leaves, whitish patches on the surface of the leaves, they are also fungi. So these are some of the common examples which we look around of fungi. So fungi, they prefer to grow in warm and humid places. And hence, we need to refrigerate our food, vegetables, etc. so that our food doesn't get spoiled by growth of fungi and even some bacteria. Now, how do these fungi affect our lives? So we find that we do eat some fungi, like there are some edible mushrooms, which are delicacies. Unicellular fungi like yeast, everybody must have heard about yeast, which is used in cooking, especially in making bread and also in making beer for fermentation. They help in fermentation and are used in these particular cooking methods. Some of the fungi are also sources of antibiotics, which are drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, which are used against bacteria. And there are fungi which cause diseases in plants as well as animals and even in humans. So there, the fungi can affect our lives in many different ways. So let us see now what are the important morphological features of fungi. So fungi can be unicellular, as in case of yeast. So you must have heard the word candida. Candida is one fungus which shows these yeast forms also, which are unicellular. When they are multicellular, mostly they are multicellular, they are filamentous. That means they produce hair-like structures. So in this particular picture, you can see that there are hair-like structures, branching hair-like structures. So their filamentous fungi body consists of long, slender, thread-like structures called hyphae. So these are all hyphae that we are seeing in this particular picture. Now, these hyphae also have different morphologies, and a network of hyphae or a cluster of hyphae is known as mycelium. So what are the various morphologies these hyphae have? A hyphae may be a continuous tube without any division, and inside that tube, cytoplasm is present, freely flowing, which have got multiple nuclei. So you can see this is a continuous tube. You can even see the cut surface. You find continuous flow of cytoplasm with multiple nuclei. Such hyphae are called as co-enocytic hyphae. Whereas in some fungi, these hyphae have divisions in between. You find that there are septae or divisions, and which are called, which hence this particular hyphae are called as septate hyphae. Septae or walls in between, cross walls, which divide the hyphae into different different parts. So these are called as septate hyphae. And the cell wall of these fungi is made up of chitin as well as polysaccharides. So now, what is the morphology of fungus consisting of? They may be unicellular, they may be filamentous. Filamentous are called as hyphae. Hyphae form mycelium. Hyphae may be co-enocytic or septate, and the wall is made up of chitin and polysaccharides. Now, let us see what is the mode of nutrition of these fungi. So, the fungi may be saprophytes, that means they may be feeding on the organic matter from dead substrate, or they may be parasites. They may be feeding on living plants and animals, or they may be symbionts. Now, what is the meaning of symbiosis? Symbiosis means living together with mutual benefit, which is also called as mutualism. So when they live with other organisms, those organisms are also benefited, and the fungi are also benefited. So some of the examples are lichens, in which the fungi live along with the algae. We can find such structures on the branches of the trees very commonly. So what does this lichen consist of? So the lichen has algae in the center, which is covered by the fungi. You can see algae in the center, which are photosynthetic, and hence they provide food to the fungi, which are non-photosynthetic. And the fungi protect the algae as well as they help the absorption of water for the algae. They help in absorbing water for the algae. So this is a symbiotic relationship, mutualistic relationship. Second example is mycorrhiza, which are present in connection with, in contact with, have a symbiotic relationship with the roots of the green plant. You can see here. Now, the green plants, they give food to these mycorrhiza in the form of glucose as well as lipids. And these mycorrhiza help in absorption of water as well as minerals from the soil. So they increase absorption of water as well as minerals from the soil. So this is symbiotic relationship between the fungi and the algae, and fungi and the green plant. Now moving on to reproduction in fungi. Before we move on to reproduction, there are certain terminologies used while explaining the reproduction of fungi. So let us see these terminologies. The terminologies are meiosis, mitosis. Now these are types of cell division. So what is cell division? If there is a parent cell which has got 2 chromosomes, this parent cell, when it divides by mitosis, it gives rise to 2 daughter cells, which look similar to that of parent cell. That means they also have got 2 chromosomes. So this is called as diploid or 2N. However, in meiosis, if the parent cell which has got 2 chromosomes divides, it gives rise to 4 daughter cells. And these 4 daughter cells, each one of them have only 1 chromosome, which is called as haploid or 1N. 1N. Okay. So This is meiosis as well as mitosis. In case of fungi, we don't look at the chromosomes, we look at the number of nuclei. So a parent cell which is formed by a combination of two nuclei will divide and will give rise to haploid spores. This is what we are going to learn ahead. So we know that fungi can reproduce asexually as well as sexually. So when they reproduce asexually, it may be in the form of a vegetative form, that is, they may reproduce by fragmentation, budding, or even by fission, where they multiply by mitosis. Or asexual reproduction may also happen with the help of production of asexual spores from the hyphae. The hyphae are generally 1N. The spores, that is asexual spores, they germinate and produce more hyphae. They are like seeds, plant seeds. In sexual reproduction, these hyphae, which are haploid, they may combine and may produce zygote, that is diploid, and this zygote gives rise to sexual spores which produce hyphae. Generally, sexual reproduction occurs in unfavorable conditions. So let us expand this understanding of reproduction in fungi. So we know now that fungi reproduce asexually by vegetative means like fragmentation. Here a part of the fungus gets broken and then it grows and multiplies into a new fungus and then by budding, a single cell buds out and this bud forms a new cell, fungal cell. So, and also sometimes by binary fission as it occurs in bacteria. Also, asexual reproduction can occur with the help of asexual spores. The various asexual spores which take part in asexual reproduction in fungi are conidia. You can see these conidia which are present on special mycelium called as conidophore. Then sporangiospores. These are sporangium containing the asexual spores called as sporangiospores. And zoospores. Now these zoospores are motile asexual spores. So let us see some more. You can see the zoospores here, which are arising from zoosporangia. So a sac-like structure which contains these asexual spores are called as sporangia. So this is zoosporangia, and this is sporangium producing sporangiospores, and this is conidophore producing conidia. Some more asexual spores like oidia as well as chlamydospores. So what do these asexual spores do? When the asexual spores are released, they germinate and produce fungal hyphae, which ultimately produces the mycelium, the fungal mycelium. But when sexual reproduction occurs, that is in adverse environmental conditions, we find that different types of asexual spores are produced, like sexual spores are produced, like oospores, ascospores, basidiospores, and zygospores. So these spores are produced in structures called fruiting bodies. The structures are called fruiting bodies. And the sexual cycle involves the various steps. So when the sexual spores are produced, they first germinate and produce the hyphae. The sexual spores which are produced are haploid, that is consists of only one nucleus, and they produce hyphae, which are also haploid. These hyphae, they come together and they fuse with each other. So first the cytoplasm or the protoplasm fuses, plasma fuses, and this is called as plasmogamy. Gamy means marriage. So marriage of two hyphal plasma. This is plasmogamy. Then also the nucleus fuses, and this is called as karyogamy. And when the nucleus fuses, fertilization occurs, leading to the formation of a diploid gamete, diploid zygote, or a mother cell. In between plasmogamy and karyogamy, there is a stage when the plasma has completely fused, but the nuclei have not yet fused, and this is called as dikaryotic stage or dikaryotic cell. And ultimately, what happens at the end when the zygote is produced, the diploid zygote or a mother cell is produced, this mother cell undergoes meiosis and produces more haploid spores, which give rise to haploid hyphae, and the whole procedure continues. So this is sexual reproduction. Now, this is all explained in the textbook. So we should always read the statements given in the textbook because from them generally the MCQs are asked. So let us read this. The haploid spores, they germinate and produce hyphae. We have already seen this. And the two haploid hyphae, which are compatible for mating, which are compatible for fusing, they come together and fuse. And plasmogamy happens, karyogamy happens, in between somatogamy happens. In some fungi, when the two haploid hyphae fuse, immediately the karyogamy happens and the diploid cells are produced. However, in certain fungi like Ascomycetes, Basidiomycetes, the intervening dikaryotic stage in which the cytoplasm has fused, but two separate nuclei can be seen in the single cell, remains for a long period of time. So this is called as dikaryophase of fungi. Later, the two nuclei also fuse and lead to production of diploid mother cell or a zygote. And this diploid mother cell goes to the fruiting body, and there it again undergoes meiosis and produces haploid spores. So this is what is shown in this diagram of fungus, sexual reproduction of fungus, that is Basidiomycetes. So we can see that this is a fruiting body of Basidiomycetes in which these diploid zygotes are present or mother cells are present, which is also called as basidium in this case. They undergo meiosis and produce 4 haploid spores having single nuclei. These spores, when they are released, they undergo germination and produce these haploid hyphae. Now, when these two hyphae are compatible, they can fuse with each other. So initially the cytoplasm or protoplasm fuses, that is plasmogamy, and they produce a cell which have got 2 nuclei and remain in this stage for a long period of time. So this is called as dikaryotic hyphae. Ultimately, these dikaryotic hyphae, they enter again the fruiting body, and where karyogamy happens, the nuclei fuse, and this leads to production of the mother cell, which is diploid or a zygote, that or also called as a zygote. And this again gives rise to the haploid spores. So this is a continuous cycle which happens. Now, kingdom fungi is divided into various classes, depending upon first the morphology of the mycelium, that is the morphology of hyphae as well as mycelium, then the mode of spore production or spore formation, and the fruiting bodies, different types of fruiting bodies which are present in different types of fungi. So the first fungus is Phycomycetes. Now, these are either aquatic or they are present on decaying wood in moist and damp places. So they may be saprophytes. At the same time, they may also be obligate parasites on plants. The mycelium, the hyphae, are aseptate and coenocytic. So this is an example mucor of Phycomycetes. We find that these are the hyphae or the mycelium, and you find there are no septae here. The cytoplasm is continuous with multiple nuclei. So this is coenocytic. The asexual reproduction takes place with the help of asexual spores like zoospores, which are motile. We had seen zoospores produced in zoosporangia. They have got the hair-like structures also, which help them to move, or non-motile aplanospores. And the spores are produced inside the sporangium. So there is a sporangium here in which the spores are produced. These are all asexual spores. But when sexual reproduction happens, it happens with the help of zygospore. Zygospore, which is present in zygosporangia. And this zygospore is a zygote, which is produced by fusion of two haploid hyphae, two haploid gametes or hyphae, and hence the zygospores are diploid. So these diploid zygospores will give rise to haploid spores and will undergo the whole sexual reproduction process which we have just seen. So these gametes or hyphae, which are haploid, which lead to production of zygospores, may be isogamous, may be similar in looking, as well as, or they may be anisogamous or different in looking in morphology. So this is a zygospore, and this zygospore ultimately gives rise to the haploid spores. So the example of Phycomycetes are mucor, rhizopus. Now we have already seen a picture of fungus growing on bread, that is a rhizopus. We have already seen a picture of fungus growing on mustard seed, that is albugo. So this is mucor. Next class of fungi are Ascomycetes. They are also known as sac-like fungi. The word asco means sac-like. So if you see the fruiting body of this particular fungus is like a sac. They are mostly multicellular, as in case of penicillium, but they are also rarely unicellular, as in case of yeast. So both penicillium and yeast fall under Ascomycetes. They have hyphae which form mycelia, and the hyphae are branched and septate. So you can see that this is the diagram of penicillium, and you find that the hyphae are septate. There are septate, and then they are also branched. This special hypha, this special mycelium is called as conidiophore, which produces asexual spores, conidia. The conidia on germination produce the mycelium, we know that. And they are, the Ascomycetes are mostly saprophytic or parasitic also. When they are saprophytic, they act as decomposers. And apart from being parasitic, they are also coprophilous. That means they also very commonly grow on dung. Now, we saw about asexual spores and asexual reproduction. If these Ascomycetes undergo sexual reproduction, then they reproduce with help of sexual spores, which are called as ascospores. So these are the ascospores which are produced in a sac-like asci, and these asci, they are arranged in a fruiting body which is called as ascocarps. So the fruiting body of Ascomycetes is called as ascocarps. So it is from these ascospores that the haploid spores will be released. So some of the examples are Aspergillus, claviceps, and Neurospora. So this Neurospora is very extensively used for experimental purpose, for biochemical as well as genetic work. Some members of this particular family, this class of fungi, like morels and truffles, are also edible. They look like mushrooms. They are very rare to get, and hence they are also very costly, but they are edible and are considered as delicacies. Penicillin, which is an antibiotic, can also be produced from penicillium. Next, coming to Basidiomycetes. So this is also commonly known as mushrooms or bracket fungi. So all the mushrooms fall under Basidiomycetes. They grow in soil, on logs, on tree stumps, and they can also live in the plant bodies as parasites. So rust, which are Puccinia, caused by Puccinia, is a plant disease which gives rise to rusty appearance to the leaves, that is reddish brownish appearance. And smuts, which generally grows on corn, is produced by Ustilago, which is a fungus in this particular class. The mycelium of this fungi are branched as well as septate. The asexual spores are generally not found in this fungus, but whenever these fungi reproduce asexually, it is by vegetative fragmentation. So we have already seen this picture of Basidiomycetes, in which we have seen the fruiting body, the basidium, the basidiospores, the hyphae, the haploid hyphae, which give rise to, which fuse and produce dyskaryotic phase, and so on and so forth. So we have already seen what is plasmogamy, which ultimately gives rise to dyskaryotic phase, which later on produce basidium, and karyogamy and meiosis, which produces 4 basidiospores. And we had also seen that there is a fruiting body, the fruiting body in which this meiosis occurs in case of basidiomycosis. Basidiomycetes is called as basidiocarps. So the fruiting body is called as basidiocarps. Lastly, Deuteromycetes. Deuteromycetes, this class of fungi is also called as imperfect fungi because only asexual or vegetative phase of these fungi are known. Whenever sexual forms of these fungi are discovered, they are often moved to other class of fungi like Ascomycetes and Basidiomycetes. So these fungi only have asexual or vegetative phase. They reproduce by asexual spores known as conidia. We had already seen conidia earlier. The mycelium is septate and branched, and some members are saprophytes or parasites, while large number of them are decomposers of litter and also help in mineral cycling. So the examples are Alternaria. Alternaria is a plant pathogen, produces disease in plants, as well as produces diseases in human beings, like their spores are responsible for producing allergies in human beings, also bronchial asthma, and others like Calectotrichum and Trichoderma, they are also plant pathogens. So this is all with the part 4 of biological classification. If you have understood this class, do share it with your friends, like and subscribe NEET Den.